Okay, so I'm still going with Kandinsky here, and I got cut off, but I was talking about, let me see if I can find it. I was talking about this, and he was just, yeah, the invitation is to go back to the previous video, which is very short and which sort of gives the main beats of what I think the reading is here. But he just got to start talking about these concentric movements of these different colors. And I was saying that there was something metaphysical about it because I was referencing the connection between sort of extroversion and warmth. Right? He's talking about, again, quote, if two circles are drawn and painted respectively yellow and blue, brief concentration will reveal in the yellow a spreading movement out from the center. That's an extroverted movement, a movement of warmth, right? Movement toward connection, which is a quote unquote noticeable approach to the spectator. And I was talking about this in terms of sort of the sections of warmth in his book, in this book, as more oriented toward connection. And then kind of in the blue, on the other hand, moves away. Sorry, moves in upon itself, moves away from us. This kind of movement, like a snail retreating into its shell, and draws away from the spectator. And I talked about this as relevant to the middle sections of his book, which in a way are more subjective and more temporal. Or I don't know, there's a way that they're more oriented to the eternal as well. So I would say that sort of going away from this the spectator is sort of more toward, as he said, more toward the spiritual, more toward transcendence, more toward up and out. Whereas this extroverted movement is more toward down and in. It's more toward the immanent. Yeah, so I just need to be careful about which connections I'm drawing. So there's a way that he's sort of talking about different motivations in art, as we were, again, the very short videos that I just published were about this inner need of art to get through these more temporal, and in a sense, subjective aspects, and the need to go through toward the eternal, which is more toward the spiritual, more toward the transcendent. Both of these, in a way, aims or styles, um, or needs being expressed in his work. And so I was connecting this blueness that I see in his work, right, with depth, with abstraction, with sadness, with again distance from the reader, with individuality, but also with fear and with ego strength. Obviously, there's a discussion again. I mentioned in the series that I've done on the new Gnosis, Robert Avens. There's one called Poetic Space as the Dwelling of the Holy, Dimensionality and the Between in Heidegger, which talks about Heidegger's discussion of blue and sky as sort of metaphors for heaven, which is very relevant here. But anyway, now we're going to go on talking about these two different kinds of movement here. So he talked about this blue as kind of like a snail retreating into its shell toward interiority, toward introversion. Quote, in the case of light and dark colors, the movement is emphasized. That of the yellow increases with an admixture of white. And that of the blue increases with an admixture of black, i.e., as it becomes darker. This means that there can never be a dark colored yellow. The relationship between white and yellow is as close as between black and blue. For blue can be so dark as to border on black. Besides this physical relationship, there is also a spiritual one between yellow and white on one side and between blue and black on the other, which marks a strong separation between the two pairs. Okay. He doesn't exactly yet say what he means by that spiritual connection, which is different than the physical. Let's see if he will reveal that. He says, an attempt to make yellow colder with white, right, produces a green tint. Wait, no, sorry. I'm not sure what movement would make yellow colder. He says it produces a green tint and checks both the horizontal and eccentric movement, this kind of movement. The color becomes sickly and unreal. So I'd connect that with the absurd. Jean-Paul Sartre, for example, in Nausea. Sickly and absurd. So there's a way that yellow is supposed to be toward warmth, that if you try and make it cold, it's like counterintuitive, leading toward the absurd, towards sickness. Quote, blue, by its contrary, acts as a brake on the yellow and is hindered in its own movement till the two together become stationary and the result is green. Similarly, a mixture of black and white produces gray, which is motionless and spiritually very similar to green. So he's talking about green as a sort of, admixture of blue and yellow, and then gray as an admixture of black and white. And for this reason, gray and green have a similar spiritual relationship, apparently. So now I'm going to show the next one. Whoop. Like so. Quote, but while green, yellow, and blue are potentially active, though temporarily paralyzed, in gray, there is no possibility of movement. In gray, there is no possibility of movement. Because gray consists of two colors that have no active force. But they stand, the one in emotionless discord, and the other in motionless negation. So white is that which is eternally discordant, so in a motionless way. And black is sort of absolutely, so motionless negation. Negation even of discord. Like an endless wall or a bottomless pit. Again, the other one is probably more relevant to that. Oop, no, sorry, this one. Yeah, so down here. Quote, because the component colors of green are active and have a movement of their own, blue and yellow, it's possible on the basis of this movement to reckon their spiritual appeal. Okay, he wants to try to talk about the spiritual appeal of both blue and yellow as found in the color green. What does he say? He says, the first movement of yellow, that of approach to the spectator. So I would say that the warm notes in his text leading toward the reader, right? Which can be increased by an intensification of yellow, intensification of warmth. That's the first movement of yellow. It leads to. Sorry, no, sorry. That's the first movement of yellow. So approach to the spectator. Okay, and then also the second movement, that of overspreading the boundaries. Okay, so there's a way that here, like what yellow goes out from the inside. It's a literally extrinsic movement, not concentric, but eccentric movement, meaning away from the center. Look at this. But there's a different kind of movement which is toward the spectator, and both of these are true of yellow. And so he says that both of these kinds of movement in yellow, they have a quote material parallel in a human energy which assails every obstacle blindly and births forth aimlessly in every direction. And so here we're talking about, we're talking about the spiritual qualities of yellow as a kind of metaphysics. So the connections here for me are obviously with human personality. And I have a lot of notes about this. So the extroversion associations are toward novelty seeking, toward risk taking, toward disinhibition, toward impulsiveness, toward exploratory behavior, toward excessive behavior, toward enthusiasm, right? Enthusiasm and sort of gregariousness or assertiveness um, as the aspects of trait extroversion, toward activity, toward energy, toward cheerfulness and friendliness, sociability, gregariousness, like I said, assertiveness, positive emotions. It's dopamine driven, that system, toward warmth. It's also associated with high cortical arousal and with the behavioral activation system moving toward. It's a quality of too much or excess or imminent excess, anticipation of excess, which is expressed materially in humans in terms of personality, but but it's expressed in lemon as very lemony. Okay, keep talking a little bit about yellow here. So again, what he said was, quote, the first movement of yellow, that of approach to the spectator, and also the second movement, that of overspreading the boundaries, have a material parallel in the human energy which assails every obstacle blindly and bursts forth aimlessly in every direction. So there's also links there to high openness, trait openness. Quote, yellow, if steadily gazed at in any geometrical form, has a disturbing influence and reveals in the color an insistent, aggressive character. So to me, this, yeah, he said, no, I just want to say that, what would I say about that? I would say there's a way that, again, it sort of bursts forth aimlessly, right? Well, there's a connection there. This insistent, aggressive character is, I would say, in a way tied to that aimlessness. There's something disturbing about that. It's a quality of being too much in every direction. Disinhibition. He said, quote, it's worth noting that the sour tasting lemon and the shrill singing canary are both yellow. Yeah, so there's something there. It's kind of like the spiritual category of yellowness and what yellowness implies. Quote, the intensification of the yellow increases the painful shrillness of its note. Quote, yellow is the typically earthy. Whoop, sorry. There we go. Yellow is the typically earthy color. Sorry, earthly color, which is, yeah, as I said, I'll go back to the other one because it's more of what we need. This one, again, it's associated with the bodily, with the immanent, with the down and in. So it's an earthly color. It's typically earthly. Quote, it can never have profound meaning. It's quite the claim. All right. So it's oriented toward the here and now. Quote, an intermixture of blue makes it a sickly color. It may be paralleled in human nature with madness. Yeah, so it's kind of associated with mania, right? With he said not with melancholy or hypochondriacal mania, but rather with violent raving lunacy. So it's the manic tendency. It's also associated with, I would say, um, apophenia, which is like drawing false patterns that don't exist, and also with sort of creative frenzy. Okay, and I'm again going to stop and come back to talk about. Actually, no, I will keep going here because otherwise it's too short. He says, the profound, sorry, the power of profound meaning is found in blue. Okay. He said yellow can never have profound meaning, whereas blue can. Quote, first in its own physical movements, which is retreat from the spectator, so meaning away from the reader, say. So I would say that the notes of sadness within Kandinsky's work don't, in a sense, amend themselves as easily to connection with the reader. And the second movement is of turning in upon its own center. Quote, the inclination of blue to depth is so strong that its inner appeal is stronger when its shade is deeper. So this is a movement toward introversion. And also toward depth, which implies that there's a shadow toward the center. Again, the connection between dark and black, so with blue. But he also associates this with sort of profound meaning. So there's a way that depth here and sort of inner depth and meaning go together. Quote, blue is the typical heavenly color. Okay, there's a couple of footnotes here that I need to go through. He said that this was about yellow earlier. So he said that any parallel between color and music can only be relative. Just as a violin can give various shades of tone, so yellow has shades, which can be expressed by various instruments. But in making such parallels, I'm assuming in each case a pure tone of color or sound, unvaried by vibrational dampers. Okay, and then he also said, yeah, about the idea that blue is the typically heavenly color. Quote, the halos are golden for emperors and prophets, i.e., for mortals, and sky blue for symbolic figures, i.e., spiritual beings. That's quite interesting. Anyway, he said the ultimate feeling that blue creates is one of rest. Quote, supernatural rest, not the earthly contentment of green. The way to the supernatural lies through the natural, and we mortals, passing from the earthly yellow to the heavenly blue, must pass through green, meaning the earth. Yeah, so to me, this is the need to admit to our human illnesses. It's the need for confession, the need to fall before we can rise. It's the descent before the ascent. It's the negredo, the first stage of the alchemical process. It's also the la purga, the purge in ayahuasca, for example. To pass through to the heavenly blue, we must pass through the green, the earthly. So blue here is connected with this quality of supernatural rest, again, closely tied to Heidegger's discussions of blue, as I was talking about. It continues, when it sinks almost to black, it echoes a grief that is hardly human. Quote, as an echo of grief, violet stands to blue, as does green, in its production of rest. Okay, not quite sure what he means there. So he's talking about how when blue sinks toward black, then it echoes a grief that is hardly human. He said, when it rises towards white, that is blue, a movement little suited to it, its appeal to men grows weaker and more distant. In music, a light blue is like a flute, a darker blue, a cello, a still darker, a thunderous double bass, and the darkest blue of all, an organ. He says, a well-balanced mixture of blue and yellow produces green. The horizontal movement ceases. Likewise, that from and toward the center. So there's a cessation of movement. Yeah, sorry, wrong direction again here. So again, talking about them, yeah, it's really the other one is better still. In going between them toward green, green is a color that he talks about as sort of deprived of motion, both kinds from and toward the center, these two kinds of movement, and also toward the spectator or away from the spectator. I would say participant. So this is, I would connect the idea of Yeats, the second coming. So the center cannot hold. So there's something unsustainable about green, which is quite interesting in the sense of a lack of movement, the movements that go along with blue and yellow. It's a kind of Canadian middling solution. Sorry to the Canadians, but quote, this is a fact recognized not only by opticians, but by the world. Green is the most restful color that exists. Again, where I'm not denying the profound value of the restful color of green or of rest per se, but only that movement is also cool. Quote, on exhausted men, this restfulness has a beneficial effect, but after a time it becomes wearisome. It becomes, I would connect that with sort of um, constancy. It becomes like a rut. Whereas the benefit of the restfulness of green is in its sort of periodicity, this oscillation between rest and movement. Quote, pictures painted in shades of green are passive and tend to become wearisome. This contrasts with the active warmth of yellow or the active coolness of blue. In the hierarchy of colors, green is the bourgeois, self-satisfied, immovable, and narrow. It is the color of summer, the period when nature is resting from the storms of winter and the productive energy of spring. And this is when we need figure 2. Any preponderance in green of yellow or blue introduces a corresponding activity and changes the inner appeal. The green keeps its characteristic equanimity and restfulness. The former, the equanimity, increasing with the inclination to lightness, to what? Toward the light, toward yellow. Whereas the latter, restfulness, with the inclination toward depth. So there's a connection here in green with when green goes toward blue, it's connected with restfulness and depth. But when green goes toward yellow, it's connected with equanimity and lightness, the quality of being light. Yeah, so I would say here that for us, I would connect this with the equanimity and restfulness as in uh, Western Buddhism. So here I would connect Western Buddhism as a kind of characteristic of illness. So there's a way that Buddhism can, for Westerners, provoke this kind of middling state, which in a way can struggle to facilitate a proper balance for Westerners between rest and movement, where we sort of we mistake equanimity for rest. We confuse the two, and we don't get that quote unquote equanimity per se would be properly a movement between restfulness and motion, and also between lightness and depth. Quote, in music, the absolute green is represented by the placid middle notes of a violin. Okay. What else does he say? Black and white have already been discussed in general terms. More particularly, white, although often considered as no color, largely due to the Impressionists, who saw no nature in white, is a symbol of a world from which all color as a definite attribute has disappeared. This world is too far above us for its harmony to touch our souls. A great silence, like an impenetrable wall, shrouds its life from our understanding. Wow, that's an amazing thing to say. He said that, quote, that he said that white is a symbol of a world from which all color as a definite attribute has disappeared. And he said that this world is too far above us for its harmony to touch our souls. He said, a great silence, like an impenetrable wall, shrouds its life from our understanding. Incredible thing to say. He said, white, therefore, has this harmony of silence, which works upon us negatively, like many pauses in music that break temporarily the melody. It's not a dead silence, but one pregnant with possibilities. White has the appeal of the nothingness that is before birth, of the world in the ice age. So I commented about that our souls are colorful by nature and therefore not inclined toward a world of pure whiteness. Again, we also see this in people like Chris Bache, for example, LSD in the Mind of the Universe, where sort of going up and away from the human toward the transpersonal, toward the diamond light, involves deeply transcending everything that is, in a sense, unique about our personhood. Quote, a totally dead silence, on the other hand, a silence with no possibilities, has the inner harmony of black. In music, it's represented by one of those profound and final pauses, after which any continuation of the melody seems the dawn of another world. Black is something burnt out, like the ashes of a funeral pyre, something motionless like a corpse. The silence of black is the silence of death. Outwardly, black is the color with least harmony of all, a kind of neutral background against which the minutest shades of other colors stand clearly forward. It differs from white in this also, for with white, nearly every color is in discord. With white, nearly every color is in discord or even mute altogether. He gives an example. Vermilion rings dull and muddy against white, but against black with clear strength. Light yellow against white is weak, against black is pure and brilliant. He also gave a footnote about Van Gogh earlier in connection with white and the Impressionists, who saw no white in nature. He says, Van Gogh, in his letters, asks whether he may not paint a white wall dead white. This question offers no difficulty to the non-representative artist, who's concerned only with the inner harmony of color. But to the Impressionist realist, it seems a bold liberty to take with nature. To him, it seems as outrageous as his own change from broad shadows to blue seemed. To him, it seems as outrageous as his own change from brown shadows to blue seemed to his contemporaries. Van Gogh's question, that he asks whether he may not paint a white wall dead white. This question marks a transition from Impressionism to an art of spiritual harmony, as the coming of the blue shadow marked a transition from academism to Impressionism. It's taken from the letters of Vincent Van Gogh. Okay, finally, he says, not without reason is white taken as symbolizing joy and spotless purity, and black, grief and death. A blend of black and white produces gray, which as has been said, is silent and motionless, being compared with two inactive colors. Its restfulness having none of the potential. Sorry, I got cut off. He was saying that a similar gray is produced by the mixture of green, which is a spiritual blend of passivity and glowing warmth. So he's talking about gray is equivalent to immobility and rest here. And Delacroix sought to express rest by a mixture of green and red. So I'm going to pause and come back to his discussions of red and green.